Hey, this is Nicole Kelly, host of Disarming Disability. Thanks for listening to the following show on Public House Media.
Hi, this is Baxter Colburn, the host of Forward Madison's podcast, Let Me Be Forward. Join me and Madeline Come every Wednesday throughout the season as we bring you in-depth interviews with players, coaches, and journalists who cover the team and experience everything that it means to go full Mingo during the 2019 campaign. A new episode comes out every single Wednesday and can be heard on your favorite podcast platform like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or head to publichousemedia.org. Thanks for checking out the following podcast on Public House Media.
Ticket to the World Cup final for the third straight year with a 2-1 victory against the English. Another heartbreaking semifinal loss for the English side as well. Your goal scorers in this one started out with Kristen Press in the 10th minute. Ellen White responded quickly in the 19th, but it was Alex Morgan's 31st minute goal that really was the decision maker here in this one. Yvonne, what were your initial thoughts?
Oh, man, where do we begin? First off, it just shows the depth U.S. has. Kristen Press, a fantastic world-class player, gets her first start in the World Cup because Rapinoe is hurt. And it's something we've talked about that this U.S. team has that most teams don't. It's that depth of quality, especially in that attack, where you can just kind of plug in somebody like Press, and she's going to give you something a little different, but something still dynamic that Megan Rapport might not be able to offer. And it probably worked out well for them because I'm sure England were kind of game planning on how to try to neutralize Heath and Rapport out wide, and then you bring in somebody like Press who gives you something a little bit different, probably threw them out of the loop to start the game off.
I agree with that. I mean, when you really start looking at what this U.S. roster had, it was depth, and it was something that Ellis was criticized in the past about. But one thing that I thought that was really different about the start of this game was just that they came out with a lot more firepower than they did against the French. And that doesn't seem like it would make sense initially when you think about how early that first goal was scored by Rapinoe. But I really liked the ball handling. I liked the possession. I thought the passes were cleaner. To start off this game, I thought that fundamentally they got off on a stronger foot. And I think that's something that when you have the depth that this team has and the substitution rules that you have in soccer, there's an opportunity for people to kind of get out of practice a little bit. I like the fact that they started off in such a strong fundamental way. It really shows that the depth is not temporary, that this is a team that can kind of respond quickly to certain circumstances. Which I thought was key, because it gave an opportunity for the United States to go out there and get their game plan going, which was to score early and often. And that was something that really paid off well against this English side, which I think the English has kind of been the quiet, good team this tournament. You know, winning their first two games in the knockout round 3-0, winning their group stage, which was a lot more competitive than I think a lot of people realized. This was an English squad that was kind of passively disrespected is what I'm going to go with in terms of what term to use, but this was a very solid English side that got beat today, and another big challenge for the United States as they've moved along in this tournament.
Yeah, I thought Neville kind of overthought the game plan a little bit for England and tried to counter a little bit of what he expected the U.S. to do instead of almost facing them head on and trusting his players in what kind of got them to the situation, which then helped the U.S. because the U.S. had a very strong lineup with Ertz in the middle, really allowing Roosevelt and Horan to press up a little bit more. And that kind of played into the U.S. hands because why the U.S. looked great to start off with was because Horan and because Rose Lavelle were just so dynamic to begin. They had these spaces and they had this opportunity to be aggressive. And part of it was because you had kind of Ertz behind them, protecting them and protecting that back line. And defensively, I thought the U.S. did a good job because of Press being in there and Press's speed and recovery and dedication to defending off the ball as well. They kind of pushed back a little bit and created kind of like a 1-4-1-4 defensively, which I think frustrated England to begin the game and kind of knocked them off the back feet for most of the game, even though they had plenty of the ball, it was with the ball but without creating anything really, especially that first half.
That possession through defense is something that really kind of popped up. And we've seen that in other teams throughout this tournament to just hopefully grab the ball and hold on to it, not allow the other team to score because they don't have the ball. Definitely has popped up in this tournament a little bit more than often, but we saw it from the Kiwis, we saw it from the Canadians, we didn't see it from the English to this point. And I think that kind of goes into the overthinking aspects that Neville brought to this. I think this was the first time that I would say in this tournament that Jill Ellis actually outcoached an opponent. In the earlier stages against teams like Thailand or Chile, she didn't have to coach. She could just let the players do whatever, and they were going to get wins. We saw big questions then afterwards in terms of how long she was leaving players out against Spain. There were a couple of questions about how she was game planning against the Swedes the first time around. And then with the French, I thought the French was kind of straight up. She wasn't going to lose the game for them based on the coaching. I don't think so at all.
She was happy to give the French possession in that game and kind of put 5 in the back and 4 in the mid and really kind of force the France and threw something at the French that the U.S. hadn't done all tournament, and it took the French team a while to create even a decent half chance until like the 60-somethingth minute, and that came because she threw something different at them, and they didn't have a plan for it.
Yeah, they didn't have a plan for it because this was the only offensive squad in the tournament that they had faced so far. Everybody else was defensive based. Even Sweden's, for all that they've got on the offensive side of the ball, they were more of the defensive minded team. And Chile, with the best goalkeeper in the world, is a defensive minded team, and Thailand should have been in the tournament. So, of course, she's going to throw something different at them, and that's only possible because Megan Rapinoe literally nutmegged like 8 players to get that goal on a free kick in the 5th minute and really kind of start things off. For the first time in a long time, because the U.S. never scored first against the French in the last 3 friendlies, for the first time since maybe Australia in the She Believes Cup, did they actually sit back and play defense after they got out to initial lead, because they never had to before. They were just able to go out there, score goals, have fun, get fans, kind of make sure that they were fostering the depth that they have offensively. This was the first time that literally any moron off the block could have said, now's the time to play defense and be okay with it. That's not a good coaching call.
That's knowing when to do it, though, because if she would have gone out coached, then she would have stuck with what they had kept on doing, and it wouldn't have been anything different, or she would have made the improper adjustments. But she made the proper adjustments, which is coaching at the right time.
But anybody could have made that call. You could have grabbed any drunk out of that stand could have made that call for the U.S. The diehard French fans would have made that call for the U.S.
No, I think it's no. I'm not going to agree with you there.
It is not. It was not that difficult of a call to make those decisions for the United States, and
if it wasn't so difficult, then why didn't France have a plan or make an adjustment until the 65th minute where they finally created a good chance?
Because
if you knew it was so easy to create an opportunity, knew that was coming, you would have had adjustments made already or ideas made already beforehand to say this is what we're going to do when they do this. But the French didn't.
At halftime, they came out.
Being outcoached.
At halftime, they came out right off. They came
that's
right out in halftime,
and that's why they're out. And same way why England's out now.
No. Neville overcomplicated things. The French were not necessarily prepared for the obvious.
Well, that's coaching. Coaching is preparation. Coaching is preparation.
This may be the most heated we've been at each other in the entire history of the show.
Probably.
So let's move on, because that's actually I have to kind of stop and think about that one for a second.
All right. So England ties it up at the 19th minute.
Yep.
White puts in her 6th goal of tournament, and White has been fantastic for England all tournament long.
I agree.
And then Alex Morgan, off a beautiful ball from Horan, on the 31st minute, gets the goal that puts them ahead. Nice header goal. Horan plays it right behind the defense. And then second half, I think Phil kind of recognized the overcomplication of things for him and tried to simplify the formation of what his team did. And they looked much better in the second half, I thought, England.
Well, I mean, those are halftime adjustments, but the way that I look at it is that England came out with a fervor in the second half, because I think this was the first time the entire tournament that they were behind, and they were in a new position themselves. And so when they came out, they realized that they had stuff to do. They got more aggressive, and they definitely brought the ball back up, but they were forcing mistakes over the middle. And the pass completion rate in the second half of the United States was lower than the first half. And they were able to cause some turnovers and get the ball going quickly back the other direction. Honestly, the game plan that Neville came up with in the first half kind of eventually worked, because he got away from the tactical aspects of it when things got rough in the second half. So even though that all that stuff kind of goes down, there were a lot of opportunities there for the English that were made on good plays and hard plays. There's a physicality to the English that they had brought that I don't think they really needed in previous matchups. And it created some interesting situations in terms of penalties, offsides, a lot of VAR usage that, at least for the English side, has not had so far. And it kind of created some moments of controversy in the second half. Let's start off with that offsides, not offsides. In our friend chat here with some other guys that have been on the show, Zach Wolpoff, Matt Pocket, those guys, we were talking about whether that was an offsides or not. What do you think? Was that offsides or not?
Yeah, they showed two lines, one where the defense was, one where the farthest part of her body, which was her foot, was, and her foot was offsides, unfortunately, by her foot, and that's an offsides. Unfortunately, it's so close to call, but yeah, it's an offsides. It sucks because it was a fantastic finish, but it's an offside.
And it was. But the thing is, too, is that you were watching the Telemundo coverage. Fox Sports did not have that two lines. They used a shading program instead. And the Sky Sports coverage didn't have it at all. And so for Zach, who's in England right now watching this game, everybody in that bar thought it was it was not offsides. I looked at the foot placement because she had brought up her right foot in the air, leaving her left foot, and her left foot was offsides. It was not her entire body, but her furthest part was offsides. It's not like a pivot foot in basketball, but more kind of like a lateral pass. If you want to go back to an obscure American football reference, the Music City Miracle, where they had that cross-field lateral for the Tennessee Titans against the Buffalo Bills. And even though it was a forward pass, because the guy stretched out his legs so far, so that way his right foot was actually behind the line that he threw it, so that even though that the pass went forward, he himself was backwards, and it was okay. Very similar situation. If that back foot was down, if she had waited like a blink of the eye or just had her weight shifted a little bit differently, she would have not been offsides. But that was the little aspect of it. And honestly, in my opinion, was probably the best use of VAR in the entire tournament, was to call that an offsides.
Yeah, it was an offsides. Sorry, Zach and everybody in England, it was offsides.
So we agree that it was a good use of VAR, definitely offsides, no goal there, which would have been the equalizer for the English, the first possible equalizer. The second one came on a penalty against Becky Sauerbrunn in the box. No penalty initially called, but they go to VAR, and a PK was assessed. What were your thoughts on the penalty? Was that a good call?
Yeah, I think it was a good call. I mean, if I feel it's very consistent with what's been called in this tournament, where it might be a soft foul, but it's still a foul. And USA kind of got luck from it in the Spain game, I think, in the second goal, something similar, where it might not be called in regular time, but then they review it, and if it's consistent in the Spain game, it's consistent in this game, it's definitely a PK. My question isn't on that. My real question is, if you've got the player who's got the most goals in the World Cup are tied, why is she not taking your PKs? England has went 1 for 4 in PKs this tournament, and White did not shoot any of them. I am just baffled by that.
And that leads to the other question about this. The follow-up is that was an extremely soft PK shot.
That was a terrible shot.
And it was on the ground. Based on what the off-the-line calls have been that have literally destroyed tournaments for too many teams, Jamaica is one of them. It's just the way that that's been used so far. Why are you even putting that on the ground? I mean
part of it's being
there's
on the
so
ground,
many decisions there that
it was so centralized. The shot was so centralized. It was right to her. Just she didn't really have to extend herself. It was such a terrible PK, horrible PK.
I mean, you could literally just like tow that thing up in the air, and they're not getting to it in time. From how far away that is, and we've discussed PKs at a very, very large amount, and you being the goaltender there. The fact that you're not shooting at the very least above the waist, if not above the shoulders, shows to me that you're not willing to put any kind of juice on that ball. You're trying to like trick them and overcomplicate things. When you have so many rules and so many VAR situations, especially if you had the VAR to get you to the penalty kick to begin with. I don't know why you would not think that the VAR would be used in case if she jumped off the line early. It was bad planning by the shooter. It was bad planning by the coaching staff. It was bad planning by everybody involved to kick like that on a PK. That was one of even though it was probably the biggest career save for Nair, it is probably one of the easiest PKs that she's ever stopped.
Yeah, and so shooting PKs, you don't want to shoot it hip at the hip length, because that's actually the sweet spot for keepers, because even shots on the ground, we still have to get all the way down to the ground. Where at hip, you only have to be on your way down to the ground to save a shot. If you're going to shoot low to the ground, you have to really the problem isn't that it was low. The problem is the shot lacked pace, and the shot lacked it wasn't shot to the corners. That's the biggest problem. You can shoot it low and to the side, and it's going to be very hard. It's going to be very difficult to get there, because if you shoot it tucked into that near post, it's very difficult for the keeper to get that far out wide and that far down so quickly. If you're going to shoot it that low, it cannot be that centralized. So that's the problem. It was too soft of a PK, not enough pace, and it wasn't shot far enough to any of the posts. That's the problem with it.
Ultimately, the United States makes the save, and things just continue to go off the rails later on for the Brits. Bright gets her second yellow card in the 86th minute, and with 7 minutes of stoppage time, a man down. English were still able to make a couple of runs. I don't believe they had any shots during that time once they went a man down, but a very difficult situation there for the Brits. Even when they brought on more for Walsh and kind of went more towards like a midfield diamond formation there, they still weren't really able to get anything close to the box to kind of set things up for how the Brits were comfortable in scoring this tournament. It kind of fizzled off quickly after that PK save.
Yeah, so 2 games in a row, the U.S. women have shown that they are very good at killing games off. The last 5 minutes plus stoppage time, they are very composed on the ball. You can tell they have an idea of what they want to do to kill the game off. They go right to the corners. They have great players who can keep the ball, who can get there. You got Morgan, you got Lloyd who will come in. Toby Heath can keep the ball as well. So I've been very impressed with the manner of how they're able to kind of kill the game off and kind of take any momentum that another team is trying to build towards the last part of the game to really kind of just suck the life out of those teams at the very end. So I was really impressed with that last 3 games for the women.
Your stat line for the U.S. in this game: 10 shots, 4 of which were on target, 43% possession, and only 68% pass accuracy. That's the first time in 2 years that they've actually been below 70% in pass accuracy, even in the games that they lost. They took 2 yellow cards in this matchup, one to Sauerbrunn, who I thought was very, very big in terms of being a liability in this matchup. I thought that she was by far the weakest player for the U.S. on the pitch, and then Haran also got a yellow card as well. With this game, the way that it went down, just in terms of the U.S. getting better, not in a stylistic matchup against a potential opponent, but for the U.S., what are some of the things that they can do personally to prepare themselves for the next round?
I guess it depends who their opponent is. I think
but I'm trying to preview for next segment and all that other kind of stuff. So let's try to keep that down to just about what the U.S. can do to improve before going to a final.
I think it's so hard to nitpick because I think their biggest weakness, what we thought entering this tournament, defending and goalkeeping, for the most part, they've stepped up to the plate. The midfield has kind of been questioned a little bit. They've kind of, especially with Haran coming in and Roosevelt playing well, and hopefully she's not injured. But with Ertz in that defensive midfield, I think everything we've questioned about this team, they for the most part have been able to answer. How about you? What do you think?
I still look at this and as I'm pulling this up just to make sure that I have everything right before I go put people on blast. With Dahlkemper and Sauerbrunn in the middle, even though that the goalkeeping was what was questioned going into things, I always kind of thought about it from the defensive standpoint of, it's almost like a quarterback, right? In football, he's only as good as the line that protects him. And a goalkeeper in lacrosse, hockey, soccer, doesn't matter, is only good as the defense that's put in front of him. And so for me, when I played lacrosse, when I played soccer, I was a defenseman. And I'm not happy yet with the middle defenders. Dunn has taken her fair share of lumps, but you've also seen Dunn react positively in a way that can pop up on that left wing and really kind of flip the field really quickly in a way that can get things going for the U.S. and scoring opportunities. She has justified in a lot of ways in what she's done well in terms of ball possession and field position to justify her placement there on that defense on the left wing. But over the middle, this may have been Sauerbrunn's worst game in a United States uniform. And
but at this stage,
it's frustrating. And it's frustrating to see that. So for me, if there's it's getting Sauerbrunn and Dahlkemper a way to strengthen up and figure out what is gonna be the difference to get them going. Is it putting Ertz a little bit further back? Is it about using a different setup over the middle? Maybe take Ertz off and use her as a as a sub to kind of get things going offensively when you need it, and letting the stars up top kind of go. There are a number of ways that are going to play out, but really right now that central defensive line is a liability for the U.S., and it's the biggest one that they got.
But we knew that already entering the tournament, and that's why Ertz the last two games, about halfway through the second half, drops back and it becomes a 5-back because she can help control that void. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, we already knew this was going to be the weak link, and they've been able to hold on well enough against their two toughest opponents so far. So, I mean, they've made the adjustments needed for what I think by kind of going to a back five to try to see these games out by putting Ertz in there, because Ertz is a monster. She's fantastic. And so, those are the weak links, but we already knew that entering, and knowing that they were the weak links and for them to continue to hold on, they're not going to become better defenders in 4 days. This is what we got.
It is what you got. And so, I mean, I'm waiting. I'm waiting patiently and carefully to see what's going on. The one flip side thing that I did want to ask you about, and we're gonna end this not on a U.S. note but a British note, and I did want to spend a little bit of time on this too, because I just put a couple of defenders on blast. One that I would like to point out, I think has done a lot of good things, has been Bronze from the British side. She has been one of the best defenders in the world, and actually Neville has kind of come out and said she'd be the best player in the world if she didn't play defense. And I think there's a lot of accuracy to that, and at least in terms of a bias towards defensive soccer players to the goal scorers, in terms of who is the greatest type of thing. You see that very consistently in all sports. It's the goal scorers, not the goal preventers, that kind of get the love from the press and the media and the casual fandoms. But for Bronze out there, she kind of had a middling game. She wasn't really in position to defend any of the two goals that the U.S. scored. And with the exception of redirecting people away from the box and making crossing passes very difficult, she kind of had very little effect in this game. For Bronze, in terms of that defensive mindset, is this a good game for her, or was this a bad game for her and therefore a bad game for the Brits?
I think the lack of, we were expecting big things from her. I think that goes back to the game plan and what Phil wanted to do. And I don't think he put her in the best situation to take advantage of what she offers and what she brings until it was too late. So I think this goes back to Phil overthinking the tactical setup and the tactical plan of how they wanted to come out.
That's fair. I'd agree with that. I mean, because for the U.S. On the men's side, that was kind of the big slam against Klinsmann for the longest time, was never putting Michael Bradley in the position that he was in, or Christian Pulisic in a position that he felt most natural, because they needed him to play something else. And so now that you kind of see that with another opportunity, I don't think we've really discussed the comparison of playing a position or playing a player at a position or in a game plan that really didn't showcase their strengths before. And I wanted to make sure that we touched on that before we headed to the break and got off this game. About a minute to go. What are your final thoughts on this matchup?
It was an entertaining matchup. It gave you everything you wanted. You wanted goals. You wanted controversy. You had a great moment for a player who, on this show and other shows, has been kind of beat up in Neuer. And U.S. continues to. They're no longer They're no longer just washing through everybody, but they're winning battles. They're winning these tight games, and I think that's really great to see, especially as they enter the final. So those are my thoughts.
I think that's a good way to put it. There's definitely a lot of positives there for the U.S. that I would say were unproven at the very least, and
Exactly.
at the very nicest that have stepped up in this tournament, and very good for the U.S. But we're going to take a break. We've extended pretty far on this opening segment about just such an important semifinal that was. We're going to come back and talk about the other semifinal. Netherlands and the Swedes make it to the other semifinal. One of those teams will move on to play the U.S. in the World Cup final in 2019. We'll tell you who it's going to be up next here on Your Soccer Passport World Cup Edition. And welcome back to Your Soccer Passport World Cup Edition here on Public House Media. I'm Brice Burge. You can find me on Twitter at @ThatBriceBurge. Brice is spelled with an I. He's Ivan Sanchez Carrasco. You can find him at Ivan Sanchez C90. Should be a good time to follow him on Twitter if you aren't already. Let's talk about the other semifinal in this dramatic 2019 World Cup. Netherlands, Sweden. I don't think we expected these two teams to be in the semifinals, let alone playing against each other. But that's how it ended up. And it's a really interesting matchup when you think about it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think we definitely didn't expect Sweden to be here. I think we both had Germany winning, and I'm very impressed by Sweden so far in the manner as they haven't gotten lucky this tournament. They've been very consistent, and I think the way they just embrace being kind of underdogs, they kind of take everything in stride. They're okay with the attention not being on themselves. I think they're very comfortable within themselves as a team, and I think you see that in how they play. They go down a goal against Germany. They keep their composure. They get two. Germany throws everything at them. They don't panic. There's an understanding in one another. There's a trust in each other. That's fantastic. I don't think the loss to the U.S. really bothered them either earlier in the group stage. They beat a pretty good Canadian team 1-0 in a game where you can't say that Canada gave it to them or anything of that nature. And then they go on and they beat a German team that hadn't conceded a goal all tournament. So the Dutch are better on paper. The Dutch have been fantastic all tournament long. They play this beautiful attacking style. They are the defending European champions. They have some really great quality players like Martins, but there's something about the Swedish team that I think could spring an upset.
Yeah, and this is an interesting matchup when you think about it too, because they do have a common opponent in this this World Cup too, in terms of Canada. Sweden won that game thanks to a 55th minute score by Blackstenius, while the Netherlands team beat Canada 2-1 in group stage in the final group stage game for both teams. Decker and Berenstein scoring in that one to go over the Canadians. But when I kind of look at this one, both of these teams were outshot by the Canadians. Both of these teams did not have the possession compared to the Canadians, and both of these teams really struggled to put shots on goal against the Canadians. That is interesting in a lot of ways because we've talked about Canada so much on the show that now you're kind of looking at the way that these teams are prepared against themselves that is legitimately questionable in terms of who's going to pop up. You don't have that law of common opponents really because they both won one goal games while being statistically secondary to the common opponent. So for me, I like this Netherlands squad. They won the European side. They've had a lot of really positive things from Edema there. 15 shots on goal for the Dutch side. Martins add 9 as well. These players are solid offensively when they get up to the box. For me, I could see this being an extremely boring game where this is going to lack a lot of the excitement that other games on the other side of the bracket really kind of brought forward, just because this is a team that, both of these teams I think really I don't want to say struggle, but choose not to go all out on an offensive front. They kind of are more reserved in a lot of ways, and I think that's going to make a less exciting matchup compared to, say, Netherlands versus Germany or something like that, or even the Italians versus the Swedes would have been a little bit more oomph to this matchup.
I don't know. The Swedes have grown on me. The Swedes have grown on me. Maybe when I thought that it was Norway that was tickling my funny bone, I think it might have been the Swedes that were tickling my funny bone, and I just picked the wrong Scandinavian country. I think I might have been off a little bit. But there's something about the confidence and the trust they have in each other that I like. Even though I think Holland is a better team, and I think their attack, especially when they are on the defensive side, is very fluid and is very complex, and it puts teams under pressure. But Sweden kind of just takes everything on the chin, and they find a way to bounce back. And you see, and I don't know, there's just something the way you had that thing about, I don't know, you had that feeling about Australia. I'm starting to get that feeling right now with Sweden.
Yeah, but you saw how well that worked out for Australia. I mean, now that being said, Australia later on I thought would have been more complex, compared to a Heidelberg less Norwegian side. But this is still a. I'm not saying that Sweden can't win this game. I just
especially because they like to play the long ball. They like to play the long ball. They're going to absorb some pressure from Holland. They're going to accept a little bit of. They're going to accept not having the ball, and I think they're really going to force the Dutch to really go at them, and they're going to try to exploit the space created by the Dutch.
And that's fair, but I just, after how exciting the last two matchups, even the one against Spain, the last three matchups have been for the Americans. When you think about some of the other exciting games, that for how exciting the Sweden-German game was mostly because of what Germany was trying to do, not because of what Sweden did. It's just, this could be a dud. This could be one of those boring games that
happens.
It does happen, and it's
after
the
Germany
way that it goes. It's just I'm kind of bummed about it.
After Germany beat Brazil 7-1, Argentina and the Dutch played 0-0 to PKs the next day. That's just the way in the World Cup in Brazil. Sometimes the way the cookie crumbles. Probably these guys also see what happens the day before. They probably watch these games, and I think by nature things get a little more conservative sometimes. At times within these, as the tournaments move on, as well, that kind of tends to happen too naturally. So, yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting this to be a game I'll tell my kids about in 20 years, but I think it makes for an intriguing matchup, even though it might not be an explosive matchup.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So you've got the offensive minds of Medema and Martins versus Asllani and Blacksteinis. You've got some great possibilities in goaltending between Vendestal and Lindahl. There's possibilities for both sides. So let's just kind of walk through these. Do you think that the Netherlands or Sweden has the advantage on the offensive side of the ball?
I think the Dutch do.
Why?
I mean, you have Martins who's so dynamic, and especially because they're going to have more of the ball. I think that's so they should be able to create more opportunities, and the more opportunities you create by nature should give you a better chance. Even though Blackstein and company, if you give them one or two, they might be even though they're not creating as much. When you're scoring and not creating as much, that also means you're being much more effective. But with that, I'm going to give it to the Dutch because I think the offense is better and they're going to have more opportunities and more possession.
On the defensive side of the ball, who do you think is a stronger team?
If we're counting goalkeeping, I'm going to go with Sweden. I think they're inclined to make less mistakes, and especially when you're going to be if you're me assuming how the way the game's going to go, where the Dutch are going to control most of the ball, most of the game. They can have all the ball, but if defensively they are in a proper shape and they're funneling players where they want them to be funneled, where they can create defensive advantages. Their goalkeeper doesn't make mistakes. She's very solid upper line, plays a lot of confidence. You put all that together, I think that's going to help neutralize the Dutch attack, which then translates into what they want to do offensively, which is play the ball quickly out long and really take advantage of gaps created. So I think Sweden is stronger. And by the Dutch nature, I think because they're going to be much more higher up defensively, it's going to create more natural gaps defensively as well for Holland.
I think so too. I think this is going to be an opportunity right now that if Sweden can score quickly on a counterattack, I think this is theirs to lose. I like that defense. I like the goalkeeping for the Swedes that I think is just too stable for the Dutch. And we kind of talked about this last week about whether or not we were going to get the best Dutch team, because we knew that the best Dutch team would beat the Italian team, even though that the Italians were the hot hand per se. But I think Sweden's a more stable team than Italy was. And because of that, they're going to be able to capitalize on opportunities a lot more efficiently than Italy was in their matchup. And I could see this one being a 2-1 Swedish side at the end of extra time.
Yeah, I can see that as well. And I think something that should be noted is these styles are going to complement each other into, if that makes sense. I think because Sweden's going to be a little more defensive and Holland, I think, is going to want the ball a little bit more. That's naturally just kind of lock each other in a little bit more. So I think the style of play is going to kind of lend itself to one another. So it might seem a little repetitive, and I think that's where the game for some people might seem a little not explosive, just because I think there's going to be a lot of repetitiveness of the Dutch having the ball, more of the ball. But I think that you're going to allow to see whoever game plan is executed right from the start is going to probably have naturally is going to have a better chance of winning. But that's just something to notice for the casual or whatever, that these two style of plays actually complement each other really well, because Sweden's going to be comfortable off the ball. Holland's going to be comfortable on the ball. So whose will reign supreme, I guess.
Well, that's a great time to ask you who you're picking.
I'll go Sweden.
I'm going to go Sweden as well. So we both have USA-Sweden in this final. That would create an epic rematch of the end of group stage play. I don't remember if that's ever happened in the women's side.
I can't remember either, but it'd be intriguing because then we get the added storylines of the Olympics. They drew 4 years ago in the World Cup. Sweden didn't play center of the starters against the U.S., kind of gave the game a wash. And if they make it to this finals, it kind of shows that, like, hey, we had this the first game we played against you guys. We didn't really, not that we didn't care, didn't want to win, but we were okay with either result, and now you see why.
It's going to be some fun stuff coming up here for certain. We'll have another show after the second semifinal is set up, and then we will have one more show afterwards, chronological, if I can say that word. I'm tired. Just kind of chronologically afterwards of the Women's World Cup final, which will be played on Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. It will be quite a matchup for the U.S. versus either the Netherlands or Sweden. Let's get your shout out, Yvonne. Who do you got?
Piers Morgan. Ha, ha, ha. Talking all this trash on Twitter about Rapinoe and the U.S., and Piers Morgan's smug little face just got by the U.S. today. So I hope he's crying somewhere.
Well, it's not the first time that the British has suffered a major loss to the Americans on July 2nd. So
their Morgan is Pierce, our Morgan's Alex.
All right, on that note, he's Yvonne Sanchez Carrasco. I'm Brice Burge. You've just listened to Your Soccer Passport World Cup Edition here on Public House Media.